we are now recording this webinar so that everyone can receive a copy of both the audio and the visual, and for anyone that wasn't able to join us today, then we will be sending a copy of this out after the event. I'm really glad that I just reminded myself to do that because I often forget. There's an opportunity for questions throughout, so again use the chat feature throughout to ask questions. We have set aside a whole section for Q&A at the end, but do feel free if it feels relevant and you want to say something there and then do, and I'll make sure that they get to Emma. We're looking at running different topics we were just talking about in webinars and in learning events throughout the UK and throughout the globe. We're currently putting together our 2018 schedule, so if anyone has any suggested topics, would like to contribute in any way, or would like to get involved, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. I think that's it for logistics and housekeeping. I don't need to let anyone know where the toilets are or anything like that, so I'll get on with introducing you, Emma. I'm really excited for this webinar today and to introduce Emma from People Lab. I have been talking to Emma for a couple of years now, but I first met Emma about a year ago when I presented People Lab at the Employee Engagement Awards at Wembley Stadium in London with the Consultancy of the Year Award, and that was a year ago in 2 weeks. And what a year it's been for both of us.
Yeah, Emma. Great year, fantastic.
Yeah, so before I hand over to Emma, I've done a little bit of research. I'm just going to briefly tell you a little bit about why I think she's going to be so great today on our webinar. Emma is one of the leading employee engagement and communication experts, not just in my opinion, but in the opinion of many, and she has definitely got the background to go with it. Emma has previously been a lecturer in psychology, and specifically in health psychology. She's specialised in behavioural change and has since had over 20 years, even though she doesn't look it and I don't believe it, over 20 years.
Something else.
Yeah, you've been working for over 20 years now, Emma, in the world of employee engagement, and I know that you've worked both in-house and also agency side in lots of different organisations in both private and public sector. Emma has also designed and developed the CIPD's range of employee engagement courses. Emma has designed and delivered programs for the Institute of Internal Communications. She's a regular conference speaker, and her case studies have been published in many industry journals. Emma's also got a sellout book that is, you can actually access that, or the first free chapter and information on the book through the Insight section that's on our website, and is also working on the second edition. So anyone that wants to help Emma out on that, particularly has any great case studies on outside of the UK, then I'm sure she would be delighted to talk to you. I might have just thrown a lot of people your way there, Emma, but there we go. Anyway, enough of listening to me. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Welcome to the few people that have just joined while I've been talking, and I'm going to really kind of hand you over to Emma now.
Thanks, Ruth. Quite an intro. I hope I live up to it. Just before we get into the research, just a quick plug on the book. I am writing second edition at the moment, as Ruth said, and despite promising myself and everyone around me that I wouldn't leave it to the last minute, the deadline is looming large. And what I'm hoping to do is to feature more international case studies in the next edition. Publishers have kind of come back and said it's something, I think, a lot of interest from around the world, which is lovely to hear. So if you're there and you're thinking, oh, I've got a great case study I'd like to share, please get in touch. Love to hear from you. And if it's UK case study, that's fine as well. We've put you some new material in it. So if you've got a story you'd love to share, I'd love to hear from you. So quick plug there, and fairly quickly because that deadline is looming large. Being last minute as I am. Okay.
Right, Emma, are you still there?
I am still here. So
great.
So
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Right. Yeah, so sorry about that. Someone's struggling to hear, so I'm just dealing with that. So this is the second year on Spotlight. I remember reading your Spotlight on Research report, like I said, a year ago now. Just tell us originally how it came about. So where you found the need for it, and why did you go about running this research?
Yeah, so I mean, anybody that works in the field of employee engagement and signs up to lots of kind of, feeds, etc., knows there is a heap of research out there. But the majority of the research, in fact, I'd say when we started this originally, all of the research kind of looks at engagement levels, which is all very interesting and helpful, but nobody was really talking to practitioners, people working in the field, and saying, how is it for you? What's working for you? What do you need? What's not working? And we started looking at this. We were saying it's a really interesting gap here because so many reports come out that tell us that employee engagement is high on the agenda for businesses. Businesses are concerned about it. They're focusing on it. If you look at kind of Google searches, Google Analytics, it will show you that searching for employee engagement help solutions is on an upward trajectory. So we know it's important. The fact that HR Review reported that HR Elite spend 15% of their time on employee engagement each week. And there's a report that comes out pretty much every month saying this is important, we need to do something about it. So I think it's a real paradox that despite this massive focus on engagement, we're not really doing that well. And again, you can pull out any piece of research in the last sort of 12 months or further back that shows you that employee engagement levels are not really where you would expect them or want them to be with this kind of massive focus on engagement. I've used the CIPD Employee Engagement Index figure here because, as you may well know, since 2016 they've measured it in a different way and they've kind of split it up into different areas. This is the last time they kind of reported on employee engagement per se. In the UK, 39%. It's not great. As I said, if you can look at a kind of whole range of reports, Aon's report, Towers reports, and it can be as low as kind of like 15% in different countries globally, up to kind of higher, more reasonable levels. But nowhere really that's doing really well as a kind of an industry or a nation. Sure, we've got some companies that do fantastically well when it comes to engagement, but as an industry, we need to get better at this. And Deloitte's 2017 Global Capital Trends report says organizational culture and engagement remain top priorities. Employee experience is a major trend. So lots of people talking about it, lots of people focusing on it, but we are not doing that well. So we thought what we need to do is to understand from the practitioners, the people that are kind of working in the field day in, day out, and say to them, well, how is it for you? What's working for you? What's not working for you? What do you need? What support do you need? That's why we ran the first research and why we've run it again last year. And as you'll see as I go through the slides, a really clear story comes out and we get some very clear answers as to why we're seeing this gap.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma. And really identified there the need, and thanks for doing it year on year, because I think that's where it really gives us the value. So tell me, who did you go out and speak to? How did you get these people?
So we spoke to 76 organisations this time. We would love to see that increase year on year. So again, a big ask to those of you on the call today, if you can spread the word and get involved in the research this year when we run it, that would be amazing. But 76 organisations is not to be sniffed at. It's a good amount of organisations getting involved. The majority, as you see there, were headquartered in the UK. So again, as we kind of take this forward, we want it to be a global piece of research. We can compare the experience of practitioners around the world, see, where we can learn from each other. We found that we had responses from pretty much the majority of sort of sectors and industries that you would expect, and a range of kind of company sizes. So when you get the full report download, you'll see, that we had kind of companies with sort of, less than 100 people through to companies with, more than 5,000 employees. So a real range of size of companies as well. And what we find is that the experience is very common across companies, irrespective of size, irrespective of industry.
Fantastic. And I'm really, really keen to see the results, because I've not even seen the report yet, Emma.
Hot off the press.
Not that I get special treatment. So I'm really, really keen to hear the results. But obviously, the purpose of this webinar is really to understand what were the key themes. So what were the key themes or findings for you?
Okay, so the picture begins to become clear, as I said, when we start looking at the results in terms of why we're seeing this gap. And I think one of the kind of biggest results for me, that kind of smacks me right between the eyes when I see it, is the fact that only 14% of respondents have got a definition of employee engagement. It's down from 25% in the 2016 report, so a fairly big percentage decrease. And I'm really interested as to why companies don't have a definition of engagement, why they don't have a common understanding of what they mean by employee engagement. And when we go out and we talk to clients we work with all sorts of different organisations, and quite often they sort of say, oh yeah, I've never really thought about it. I've never really thought about what it means to us here, or it's a bit too difficult to define, or everybody's got a different view. But for me, kind of all begins with that, you know, when we talk about engagement here, what do we mean by it? Is it creating a great place to work? Is it becoming an employer of choice? Is it taking one of the definitions that sits out there? So yeah, just 14% have a definition. And following on from that, you know, less than half have a strategy. So again, you know, how can you hope to improve and develop something if you haven't got a definition and a strategy and plan to do it? So straight away, it's like, well, no wonder we're not seeing those improvements we'd like to see, because we haven't got our, I won't say the rude word, we haven't got our act together when it comes to engagement. And then following on from that, what's interesting is that you know, more and more companies are being, well, practitioners are being asked to demonstrate return on investment, which I think is a good thing. I'm a massive fan of research measurement. I have background as a research psychologist, so for me, it's always about, well, if you're not going to kind of measure what you're doing, then why bother doing it? Because you'll never know if it's worked. You might as well just sit in the room and do nothing. So I've always been passionate about measurement and ROI. And we see from the report this year that, you know, there's a big increase in practitioners being asked to demonstrate ROI, which is a step in the right direction. But the problem that we find is that only 28% of respondents said that they thought engagement was well measured in their organisation. So they're being asked to sort of do a measurement piece and demonstrate ROI, but they're also sort of saying, but we're not that good at it yet. So I think, in a nutshell, that kind of slide demonstrates straight away why we're seeing this employee engagement gap.
Right. So apart from what I can see, the measurements improving, yeah, it's not necessarily painting a very positive picture so far, Emma. I'm hoping you're...
No, but there is some good news. There is some good news. Okay, so, well, sort of early signs, you know, early signs of good news, and hopefully it's not too tokenistic, but we did see this year that a big jump from last year of professionals, practitioners that have got employee engagement, their job title. So I think that's sort of saying that companies are at least moving in the right direction. They're saying, we know this is important, we're going to create a job which is all about helping us to improve and develop this. So that's got to be a move in the right direction, I think. So that for me was a kind of a, you know, first sign of something a little bit more positive from the research. So something good to report on there.
Great. We've had a question come in actually from Carrie, who has asked us if these are the respondent percentages, then were there lots of respondents at the same organisation, or were they mostly at different organisations?
Mostly at different organisations.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm actually intrigued to talk a little bit further about this this very low statistic around having a definition.
Yeah.
What do you think's going on with this definition of employee engagement?
Well, I know we plugged it before, but the first chapter of my book is all about defining engagement, and you can download the current book, chapter 3, from the EEA website. And I think, you know, there is no single universal definition of engagement. I know when James McLeod and Nita Clark originally wrote their report to government in 2009, they counted over 50 different definitions. There's probably loads more now. So it is quite a challenge because there is no single universal way of defining this. But for me, being a glass half full kind of person, I think this is a great opportunity, because I think it means that you can kind of come up with a definition that works for you and your organisation. And I think there's a lot to be said for having that conversation inside an organisation around, well, when we talk about employee engagement, we kind of know it's important. We know we need to be focusing on it. What do we mean by it? Is it about creating a great place to work? Is it about involving people in the success of our business. It's about becoming an employer of choice. And there's lots of opportunity there to really figure out what it means for you. And you'll see on that slide there that I've just shared that of the 14% that do have a definition, it's not well understood. So even where there is a definition, people are saying, yeah, but actually it's not well understood. And I'm not necessarily saying that, you know, every employee in a company needs to understand what on earth employee engagement means. I'm saying that the people who are key to improving developing it in a company need to understand what we mean when we talk about employee engagement. And I think that's part of the reason that it's hard to make progress, is because everyone's kind of got a bit of a different view around what it means and where it sits, and, you know, is it something that HR look after? Is it manager's responsibility? Is it an internal comms thing? Is it about the chief executive? And without those kind of conversations and kind of getting on the same page, it's hard to make progress. So I think some really good quick wins there. When we run out workshops and master classes with clients, you know, we always start by saying, right, let's kind of figure out what we mean when we talk about this. It might be that we never use that word again in that organisation. We get rid of it altogether because it's not that helpful, but we all have a clear understanding of what it is that we're working on when we talk about this.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. The statistic of now 39% of the respondents have got engagement in their job title, yet not only at an organisational level are people not really clear on what that means and what that means to their organisation, but even those people that have it in their title, and that's only in my opinion of the people that I'm meeting on a daily basis, who are saying, you know, I've now got this job title with engagement in it, but I don't really know where to start, and I don't really know where I sit, and so definitely a common theme. Nice to see that the research backing up my gut.
And it's not, you know, we'll come on to this later. It's not their fault, because they've kind of often been given this job and told to get on with it with very little help, support, training, development, investment in their kind of skills and capabilities. So, you know, it's not their fault. Yeah.
So where are organisations then focusing their time and attention?
So in the research we ask about the enablers of engagement. It's a really useful framework. It's well understood. It's well used around the world actually. You know, we do a lot of work with companies overseas as well, and it seems to have landed really well, the kind of engagement success enablers. So we ask about the enablers and say, you know, are you doing work in which of these areas? You know, some or all. And you'll see from that slide there that you know, the biggest area of focus is on line managers. It's got up 3 percentage points from last year. Employee voice next, and it's kind of changed a little bit, but not hugely significantly. When David and Nita first kind of came out with the enablers, we had a very similar model at People Lab that we used, but we had a fifth enabler, which we call involvement, so we stick that in as well, because we think involvement was kind of missed off the framework. It's important enabler for engagement. So the one that's obviously not so well, not so highly scoring there is integrity. And I guess for me, I've always seen integrity as being an outcome of the 4 above, rather than something that you would necessarily focus on per se. So integrity, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is kind of defined as the words and the actions of an organisation matching, so people have trust that what you kind of say, what you do are aligned, and sort of kind of, you know, or words and their action. And for me, you know, a way to achieve that is kind of through the 4 enablers above. So although it has kind of reduced significantly from last year, that's the one that's a big change really. But that gives you a flavour of, you know, where people are kind of focusing their time.
Great, thank you, Emma. We've had a question. What does the star mean next to enablers for engagement at the top there? And I think you referenced it, but what we didn't reference is on, we didn't put it on the slide. So the star references the Engage for Success enablers plus the addition from People Lab. So thank you for that. So line managers are scoring well, continuing to score highly. Is this a surprise?
Well, there's this really interesting finding here, Ruth, because although we see there's a lot of focus on line managers, what we see is that is not yet being translated into kind of positive impact. So although managers are being focused on, they're also being cited as a barrier to improving engagement. What we found from the research was that only 28% of respondents said that they felt their managers have a good understanding of engagement. and they said the respondents said only 13% of their managers they would rate as good at engaging their teams. There's a big decline there. You see this from the stat at the bottom that the year before we had 38%. 38%. They've declined by 25%. So what we're seeing in a nutshell is that I think that practitioners are recognising they need to do some work with line managers. So I actually think it's not as surprising as you would first think by looking at these slides. I think what these stats are telling us is that the previous slide is saying, I know we need to focus on managers, and this slide is saying, and this is why, because we know that they don't get this stuff and they are not good at doing it. So we've got to invest some time and effort in supporting our managers to engage their teams. So I think the two actually do tell quite a clear story.
Fab. We're actually running a webinar on that in a couple of weeks' time, around engaging line managers, particularly line managers on the front line. So that is a hot topic for anyone. Anyone can really relate to the research that Emma's just shared there, and would like to hear some case studies of organisations that are engaging with focusing on line manager and engagement, then book on. It's on our website. Awesome, thank you, Emma. So tell me a little bit more around where budgets are going, or where money's going.
Yeah, so I guess what's quite concerning for me is there's little investment in developing skills capabilities of both managers and practitioners. So we see that just 57% of budget allocated to training managers in engagement. We didn't ask that question last year, so we can't compare it. And only 20% are saying budget is there for coaching. And I think what's really startling for me is that only 29% of professionals we spoke to had received any kind of formal engagement training. And what we hear is that it's lack of budget is often the issue. That they know the training is out there, there's courses they can go on, there's other sorts of training they could do as well. Not just about classroom learning, but there's little sort of investment to do that. So clearly that needs to change if we're going to see that engagement gap close. I'll just skip on to the next one actually, because I know we're running out of time quite quickly. In terms of other resources, the survey, most of the money goes to survey still. Survey is still king. We're finding that time and money are really kind of being allocated to the survey, which demonstrates that we're still very much in a transactional place when it comes to engagement, rather than the transformational place. And then the next slide shows that basically budgets are shrinking. No surprises there. So basically we have to do more with less, which is always a good challenge.
So would you say that budgets are shrinking specifically in engagement, or would you say actually there's less money now?
I think there's less money now in terms of conversations that I have with other agencies. I was with some people yesterday who run an events agency, and they were saying that they are finding the same thing in their world. So running kind of face-to-face internal comms and external comms events. I think it's the world over really. There's less money out there, and a requirement to do more with less.
Mhm. And would you say that's the main barrier, the lack of budget?
I don't think it is. I think that a couple of things. I think I'm actually a fan of the zero budgeting approach, i.e. if you want some money, you can make a really good case, a good business case, demonstrate cost benefits, demonstrate ROI, then often that's a good discipline to get into, and helps to professionalise the sector as a whole. And certainly something we've done a lot more of actually with some clients is helping them to put that case together. So you have to go back to things like looking at the cost of every time an employee leaves you, what's that cost, and kind of some companies put it about 20k every time someone walks out the door. Other companies are a bit more conservative and say it's about 5k, but you can put a cost to that fairly easily. So if you've got an issue around attrition, then putting in place a kind of cost benefit approach to say, if we do this, we think we can reduce attrition by this. It's often quite a clear case to make to get some of that budget to focus on the things you need to focus on.
Great. And what were the other barriers that came out of your research?
Yeah, so the barriers were very similar to the first year we ran the research. So we found that getting buy-in from senior leaders is still a challenge for practitioners. There is a kind of a tokenistic approach, I'd say. So many leaders go, yeah, we know it's important, you've got to do something around this, but we're not going to give you any time, or we're going to give you a bit of time, but not that much. We're not going to give you any budget. We're not going to invest in your development. And it's kind of a little bit of a poison chalice in some ways. So lack of buy-in was still an issue for many practitioners. Line managers we've talked about, lack of resource and budget we've talked about, and lack of understanding we've talked about. So kind of the same things are coming out this year as came out last year.
Great. And those barriers to me don't really come as a massive surprise. As you said, they've not really come to you as a massive surprise either. But I'm conscious of time. We've got about 10 minutes left, and the opportunity to ask questions. So tell me, summary, what were your findings? And then the bit that I'm sure everyone's eagerly waiting on is, so what? So what do we do about it?
So summary, just really quickly. So some positive signals, I think, in terms of, the job title. It's a good positive signal, I think. And starting to move away. I mean, when you get the full report, you'll see that companies are starting to move away from the annual survey and do more kind of regular listening, regular pulse checks, which is great, and an increased demand to demonstrate ROI, which I think has only got to be a good thing. But it comes down to sort of the same issues as last year, really. No definition, lack of understanding, lack of strategic approach, resourcing engagement is still an issue, tricky budget, etc. So. And I think one of the key things for me is the little investment in developing skills and expertise. And I know, Ruth, you and I have been talking about, we're going to be launching this year, is running some more research to develop essentially a competency framework and a career development pathway for employee engagement practitioners to really professionalise the area, the sector, the industry, whatever you want to call it, so that people understand what good looks like. And if I want to be really great at this is what I need to do, these are the skills that I need, and this is the areas I need to develop in myself to get there. So I'm really passionate about that. So that's something that Ruth and I are going to be working on. So watch your space. Anything on that one, Ruth, before I move on to the so what bit?
No, unless anyone really wants to get involved and help us work on that and really help us identify that. It's definitely become a need, shown up as a need even in your research, Emma. And
absolutely.
I think it's people are like, I've been given the job title employee engagement or employee experience or anything to do with our people, and I really don't know what good looks like, and it depends on the organisation and the CEO. So let me how do I benchmark myself? So
and in the full report, you'll see that one of the points we make is that the practitioners we spoke to are really hungry for more. They want to develop themselves. They want to get on, they want to be great at this stuff, so that's great. Some of the recommendations, so some of the kind of key points we'd make really easy, simple, quick win is just have a definition for employee engagement or whatever you want to call it. Just understand what it is that you're tackling, what is it you're going after here. Have a strategy plan. We do a lot of work with organisations to help them develop their strategy, and it's one of those kind of, I suppose, people have a bit of a mental block when it comes to strategy, and they're like, oh, I don't know where to start, and it's quite a simple, quick and easy process. And if you haven't got the budget to bring in consultants like us, just buy the book and plug in the book here. Or we give away downloads all the time. It's not something that has to be really difficult. It can be quite simple and easy to pull strategies together. Obviously, engage your stakeholders. That goes without saying, and I think it's much easier to engage your stakeholders when you've got a clear definition and a clear strategy and plan that's got the kind of ROI case in it. Developing experts we've talked about. One of my absolute passions is kind of how we develop a team and network of practitioners across the world who are experts in this area. Investing in success, so kind of put your money where your mouth is. Obviously focus on leaders and managers. We've talked about that a lot. And the last point, we haven't gone into it in so much detail in this webinar, but it's in the report, is looking at the potential of technology. So, not a week, day goes by I don't get an email from some new supplier in the marketplace with an amazing app, an amazing, package that's going to kind of solve employee engagement for me. There's a lot out there. You need to understand what's the potential of these new technologies to help us engage our people And if you're interested in that, we did run a piece of research earlier this year, late last year, on enterprise social networks and the capacity of those platforms to help engage people. So that's the kind of recommendations in a nutshell. So I think we went on to, any questions?
Yeah, any questions? Or actually, I'll add to that, Emma. Any suggestions or recommendations where people have had successes in their organisation that they'd like to share? Because after all, that's what we're about at the EEA, is bringing people together to learn from each other. So if anyone's got anything, then pop it, write it down, and I'll read it out. Or if there's anyone shy, they can message you afterwards. Yes, Emma?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, my email is very simply emma@peoplelab.co.uk, so feel free to drop me a line. But obviously we'll be sending out the recording and the full reports, and as I said, there's various amazing resources that are on the EEA website that will help a lot of this that we talked about today. And if you have got any case studies.
Yeah, no one's typed anything yet. Everyone's still here.
Cool. Well, you know, that's either because I bored everyone to death, or I've done such a great job of explaining it that it's all really clear, which I can't believe.
So there's a few people saying thank you. Lots of thoughts. Rather than typing it all now, I'm going to have a think. Thanks so much for sharing these results. Lots of food for thought. So I think it must be the great job thing, Emma. That
let's go with that.
A lot of to go and reflect.
Positive thinking for a January day, I think. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, lots of food for thought. So if anyone does say anything, what I'll do is I'll just leave this webinar open, but I'll mute myself and Emma. So if you do want to put anything in, then it will be that we can include it in the recording.
And what I just like to quickly as well plug the competency research again. It's going to be really interesting piece of work that I said Ruth and I are working together on partnering on this, and we're going to be doing kind of in-depth interviews with practitioners as well as a survey to find out, what are the skills and capabilities that you need to be brilliant at these kinds of roles. And the idea is we will develop a kind of I hate the word competency framework because it sounds like really management speak, but we find a better term for it. But a really clear idea of these are the sorts of things that I need to do, I need to practice, need to kind of flex muscles in to be good at this stuff. And this is what I'm good at already, and this is what I'm not so good at, and we'll have some sort of diagnostic tool as part of the output of this piece of research. And obviously we'll be developing some training development which will get accredited as well, so people will be able to actually kind of have a qualification in this, which makes it kind of much more professional, I think, and hopefully again stakeholders will take it a little more seriously if you actually know this is a proper area that you need expertise and skills, and it's not a kind of an area that, being a willing amateur will only take you so far. You kind of need to be a psychologist, you need to understand the research, you need to be a statistician, you need to be, be able to facilitate, etc., etc. So very excited about kind of running that this year with Ruth and the team at the EEA. So
thank you, Emma. We've got two people. Two people have just said that it would be very useful. So there's our two bookings. We've also got a question: does anybody use the Best Companies app to see what successful businesses do? Have you got any experience with that, Emma?
I've not used the app myself. I've worked with a number of clients over years that use Best Companies, are part of Best Companies, with mixed feedback really. Some of them have used it for a bit and it's kind of done what it needs to do, and then they've gone on to use something else. Others are advocates and love it. So, but I've not, personally, used that at People Lab. But interested to hear if anyone else has got experience of that.
Yeah, if anyone does, then drop me an email and we can share that with some of the post-webinar collateral that we send out. And thank you, Teresa, for the suggestion. Perhaps we should change the term employee engagement to help our senior stakeholders sit up and listen. I agree. I need to think of a more vocal term, let's say. So if anyone's got any great suggestions on that or had any great successes, I remember in my previous role, neither using the term employee nor engagement when I went up to the CEO's office.
Yeah.
And that
Interesting
helps.
as well. Ruth and I were having a conversation, I don't know, before Christmas about the increasing use of the term employee experience, and whether we think engagement is kind of evolving into experience, and if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And you know, we had quite a good discussion about that, didn't we? So it's interested to hear what other people think about that. And I know in that Deloitte report that I cited at the beginning, they talk this year. I really noticed it jumped out about employee experience, not employee engagement.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that the two are very different, and it's the employee experience that determines the employee engagement. And actually, just waving the two phrases around, and Ashley just said here, it seems to be the alternative that's being banned around at the moment. I completely agree, Ashley. People are like, oh, it's the next new thing. We did our employee engagement survey 5 years ago, and now let's start talking about the word experience. I think it's really important to be clear on the differences between the two. And whilst you'll hear us at the EEA talking about them both, it is the experience that determines the engagement, whether employees are having a positive or a negative, or the experience that happens in the same way that it's the customer experience that determines the profitability and the sales. It's the same at an organisation. It's really important to be clear on the two. That's my opinion. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of others. I'm conscious of time, if anyone has got, still people are here, but if anyone needs to head off, or if anyone's got anything else, then drop me or Emma a note, get in touch, and I know Emma's super approachable and super helpful, so if anyone's got anything, then messages after. Thank you, Emma, very much for joining us today from somewhere along Southern Rail Line. And thank you to everyone that's joined us all over the globe. As promised, we'll send you a recording, and we hope to see you at another webinar or another event with us very soon.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Ruth. Thank you very much for inviting me, and thanks everyone for listening, and hope to continue the conversation.
Yes. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.